Well, like I say, my name is Joaleene Miranda. There is a saying in show business that I was born in a trunk, and I was. Uh, it's not real, but yes, you are born in a trunk when you're born to a show business family. And I'm the fourth generation of 5 generations in show business. So it's a lengthy story, but I came down here from Chicago to co-produce a documentary on the history of showboats. These are showboats. And showboats are very unique, and I'll show you, especially today. This is a showboat right here, just this boat here. This is a tug. Now, there are many boats that have paddle wheels, and it came to pass that everything that had a paddle wheel could take the name of a showboat. But that's not true. They're not showboats, because a showboat has no power. It's just a flat-bottom barge with a theater.
Okay.
Now, my grandparents, great-grandparents, and grandparents had showboats from 1900 to 1943. And in it, they did the shows. This is the inside of it. And this is my mother down there. My mother was born on the boat.
Okay.
And she was raised on the boat. My great-grandmother was the woman that started it all. She was from England. And she was a young girl. She was very passionate about show business, wanted to be on the stage all the time. And so there was a theater group that came to her town in England, Weston-super-Mare, not too far from London. And they were a Gilbert and Sullivan touring group. So they wanted to have auditions. So she found out about it, and she left school and went and had an audition, and they took her, they hired her. And she was thrilled. She went back to see her mother and told her, "I'm leaving tonight, I'm packing, leaving tonight." Mother said, "No, no, 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 you don't. You finish your school, you stay home." And she said, "No, no, no, I'm leaving tonight." And they argued, and she said, finally told them in their best English, proper English, which translates to our American, called "Watch me." And she left. And the problem was she was only 14.
Oh.
But she started, and she did 2 years with the group, met a young man, got married, and then came to America. And that's where we really began.
Okay.
They had medicine wagons. I don't know if you know what a medicine wagon is. It's sort of the first commercialized entertainment, form of entertainment. You have entertainment, you have product. And the product makes it so you can entertain. So they had a wagon similar to this, and they would have a stage in the back, and they would go to little towns, any town, and they would set up, and my great-grandfather would do a little bad magic, because he had nothing to do with the show business, knew nothing, but he learned some bad tricks. So he would do that, and then my great-grandmother would sing and play guitar, and then they would sell medicine. Now the uniqueness of the medicine is they made the medicine. And they guaranteed that all the farmers and all the people that worked so hard, that had so many aches and pains, would forget all their pain if they took this medicine. So they would take a sample, a young man in the audience, pull him up, and they say, "We're going to show you how it works." And they go like this, and then they take the medicine, put it on like that, and the boy would start to sweat. And he forgot all his other pains because he had one big one right now. And it turned out the recipe on the boat, which I still have in case it gets tough, the recipe consisted of 50% cayenne pepper, 50% kerosene. Kerosene would open the pores, the cayenne pepper would go in, and you would forget your name. So they did that for several years. They were in New York, and they wanted to go west. So my great-grandfather came in with a wagon and told my great-grandmother, says, "Pack your bags, bring the children down, we're going west." These are 2 European people over to New York, just barely knowing New York, and they're going west in America in the 1800s. It's very, when I lecture, I always at this time say, I'm very happy to know that insanity is not really hereditary. But they were pure pioneers, and they went west, and it took them 2 years to get to Texas. They went through everything, storms, Indians, everything, and got there. And they had 2 children by then. They eventually got a summer season on a boat, showboat, and they had no idea what a showboat was. So they said, well, it can't be too bad. It's the whole summer season, and it's room and board and some money on the side, so it's got to be okay, you know. So they went and they tried, and they got picked up by a captain for the summer season. And the unique part about it is here in Augusta, I had no connection to Augusta. Never heard of Augusta, Kentucky. Augusta, Georgia, yes. Family works it, yes, know it. But Augusta, Kentucky, had no idea about it. And so I'm here in Augusta, and I'm reading in my grandfather's book, in one of his chapters, as to where they first saw their first showboat. And I'm reading and being in my store in Augusta, in a little museum in another store, and it says, Captain Price sent a telegram saying, we'll pick you up the second Monday in May in Augusta, Kentucky. And immediately, even now, when I talk about it, it goes like, because I had no reason to be here. So, fate brings you on many, many trips, many journeys. So they came, they did a summer season on the river, and it was great. The audience loved them. They loved the audience, the trip. I mean, it was a perfect way of working, because it was like a vacation. You do one show, get into a town, do one show, then you go to another town. You fish, you swim, you do whatever you want, you know, so it was great. So then my great-grandmother said, oh, we have to have a boat. So they had the medicine wagon still. They had the wagon, 2 mules, 2 children under the age of 8, and they went back to Pennsylvania, up in someplace in Pennsylvania where they make boats, and on the river, and she insisted that they get a boat. So my great-grandfather, being a very smart husband, said, okay, I'll build you a boat. So he built her a boat, and it was a 10 by 30 skiff, wooden skiff, flat bottom skiff. They put, in the spring, they put the wagon, the 2 mules, 2 kids under 8, and all their belongings, and pushed out into the Ohio River. No oars, no steering, no ropes, no lanterns, no nothing, just their things. And I said, thank God the river was very kind to them and didn't kill them. They floated till they could get to the side, and then they would see trees, and they'd do the hand over fist on the trees until they could pull in. They would do a little show. If there was a town, they would try and buy some things they might need, and they'd go a little further, and they'd go to the end of the season like that. So they had such a good time with it. They sold the boat for firewood at the end of the tour, got back on the wagon with the 2 mules, went back up to Pennsylvania, built another boat, and did it again. They did this for 4 years, till they finally got a banker that thought they were such great people and gave them a chance, and they built that boat way up at the top there, that little boat. Didn't last long, it wasn't a great boat, so, but they did have it for a while. After that, they just went from one boat to the other, and then this boat here is the boat that they ended up with, that was built in 1918.
It's huge.
It seats 850 people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite large. There is another boat that's very famous here, and it's the last of the showboats. It's called the Majectic, and it was very well known in Cincinnati because it was docked there for a long time when it was built in 1923. The Majectic is now, they're all legends, but the Majectic is the last legend that's around, even out of the water or in it. But it's a sister ship to my grandfather's boat. And it is exactly the same, except it only seats 200. So ours was much longer and wider. They had a great career. They took the show. My grandfather took it over after a certain point. They all had captain's license. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, Coast Guard captain's license. And they took the boat sort of on the road. They took the show part, and they went to New York and to Chicago. Now, you've been to New York. Mm-hmm. Now, the shows that they would do would be old melodramas, which are very corny, very funny, and very not New York. Very country. They're for farmers. I mean, the boats served a purpose to entertain the farmers, the miners, and everybody alongside here, alongside the river, that had no access to any other entertainment other than barn raisings or babies or marriages or whatever. So the comedy in the show that you did had to really relate and connect to the audience. Well, these are different shows that Broadway would never, you'd think, no, my grandfather was very gutsy. He took it to Broadway. And they loved it so much because it was different, it was funny. My grandfather was a great performer, and they titled him the Will Rogers of the Rivers, which I don't know if you've ever heard of Will Rogers, but Will Rogers was a very, very famous, in the top 5 comedians of just talking, in front of the curtain, just coming out after the show and talking. So he made his way through, and he also in Chicago he went. but he had such a great career. Now, this piece is an organ of type. This is called a Calliope. Now, proper people, educated people, call it a Calliope in English, whatever. But all performers and people who had to play it or be with it or knew it was called Calliope. It's a steam organ, and it takes each key to play it 121 pounds of steam pressure for one key, one note. So this is my grandmother. She was a very fine musician. In the 1800s, when she was just a young girl, she had her own orchestra, all-girl orchestra in Indiana, which was unheard of in the 1800s, of all-girl musicians playing theaters and things. But she was a very modern type person in some ways. But she played the Calliope, and it was heard for 10 miles at least. We have a specific story that verifies that. But on the river, each boat that always had a Calliope, and each one had a different sound. So they could hear a Calliope and say, "Oh, Bryant Showboat's coming." So, or, Price's is coming. They knew exactly who it was. And in the towns, they became like family because they would come every year, one or twice a year. So they would come in. If you asked a child, "How old is he?" "Oh, I'll be 7 come Showboat time." So it was a very, very typical part of their life. And they knew everybody in the little towns. My mother went to school. She graduated from high school. It took her 18 schools to do it because she kept testing down the river. But anyway, the Calliope is, we had one of the largest, of course, and like I said, it was heard for 10 miles. At a certain point in the river, there's a bend in the river, and from that point to a prison, it was exactly 10 miles. There was a young man in the prison that they asked his last request, and he said, "I would like to hear 'Nearer, My God, to Thee,' played by Josie on Bryant's Showboat on the Calliope." So they contacted my grandfather. Grandfather asked grandmother, and she said, "Sure." And she played it. He heard it, so we know it's 10 miles. It's a typical way of measuring things back in those days. But and she never dressed like that. She used to wear what they called, what the farmers would call a sou'wester, which is a raincoat that is very heavy. It's made out of oilskin cloth. And it would go to the floor, to the very floor, and it would be long in the sleeves, and then it had a hat to come this way and down in the back, so where none of this would touch her. And then she would wear asbestos gloves. And she would stand out and she'd play in this because the steam would go up, turn around like acid rain, hot acid rain, and come down on you. So it was very, very, it would burn you, burn the skin. So it was very dangerous. But she was, this was a photo opportunity that was taken in Cincinnati. They spend a lot of time in Cincinnati, so a lot of the photos, you'll see the background of Cincinnati bridges and things. These were all the shows. This is my mother over here, the three-way there, and this is the matriarch triangle. Little one is mother, the one on the left is my grandmother, and the one on the right is the matriarch, Lady Violet. On the Showboat, she was always called Lady Violet. Never lost her English traditions or her accent, and she would have high tea on the boat, but only by invitation. So everyone would eventually get to go, but on her terms. But my mother was born on the boat. She went to work when she was 6 weeks old. In every one of these melodramas, it was always a child in it or a baby in it, either in or out of wedlock. And so it was, the rule of the melodrama was that the baby or the child had to die, and then everything was okay. All the problems were solved. The drunk got sober, the pair got married, whatever, and it solved all that, and happily ever after, except for the poor kid. So, so as a baby, when she was 6 weeks old, she was carried across the rivers in the shows all the time. Then Grandpa said, "That's enough, no more freeloading, she's going to work." By 14 months, she was on stage in a little costume, telling poems, thanks to my grandmother, who was a very strict stage mother. And she was working by 14 months. the shows went very well. My grandfather wrote a book. My mother wrote a book, Here Comes the Showboat. My grandfather wrote Children of Old Man River. She wrote a cookbook.
And one of the book is available on Amazon, no?
This,
Yeah,
Here Comes
this
the
one.
Showboat is. Yes,
Yeah.
this one is.
Hold on, that
This
I-
is available on Amazon. I'll be carrying it next spring. This is not, unfortunately. This went into public domain, but it was picked up by another company. My big main pride is that in this is a glass enclosure, and this is a replica of the boat and the tug, and with some history of the Ohio and the River Park Mark Twain, a little story on him. And this was my grandfather's boat was chosen to represent the history of showboats, and it's in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, which is a huge honor. But he, like I said, he was very well known and highly respected on the river. They did, this gentleman up here was a famous radio, Ralph Edwards, used to do life stories surprise them by doing the life story of them, of not regular people, but special people. So they did that. He had a lot of time on TV when TV was just starting, and radio. So they were very, very big and very, very respected, like I said, and terribly liked. They would do, he was well known for his generosity. If a family came up and said, oh, geez, Captain Billy, I just don't have the money right now. I got all these kids, and I'm doing more kids and corn. And they'd say, we'd love to see the show, but we just can't afford it. And he'd say, yo, you come back. Bring the kids, bring the wife, don't worry about it, come back. And he says, you got a little corn or whatever, throw it on the, on the boat, whatever, that's fine. If you don't worry about it, just go watch the show. Well, this one time said, okay, fine, we'll drop it off. And so they came by and they saw the show, loved it, and they got out and he says, Captain Billy, I left you that corn you wanted. It's right down here on the dock. Okay, fine. They left, came back. He had a whole wagon load of corn dropped off. The chef was very inventive as to how many times in different ways you could eat corn. But there are so many stories, it's hard to find just the appropriate ones or the right ones, because it's just, like I said, he was there for a little over 40 years. They sold the boat the year I was born, which unfortunately I didn't get to, although I can't live forever. I didn't get to be on the boat, but I have been on other boats like it. But it's a special part of history. It's very Americana because this is the only country that ever had showboats. Paddle wheels, yes, you had paddle wheels and different things, but showboats are different. So it's a very historical, monumental piece of history. Now, when I was born in a different era. I was born in what they called the nightclub era, which was just 100% different than the showboat era. And it was, like it said, it was totally nightclubs. And all these little towns had nightclubs. A town like this would probably have 3 nightclubs. They would have, the major restaurant would be a supper club with a band and a show. The pub would be Roadhouse. We may have 2 roadhouses, and then of course always in the woods there was another specialty type nightclub. So we won't go into those, but anyway, this is the show I was born into. This is my dad, this is my mother, and this show was created in Hawaii in 1946. This picture here of me in Hawaii is on the microphone. That's my first appearance. They took a show from LA, they took performers from LA on a plane to go to Hawaii and said, oh, we have this vaudeville theater that we're filling, we want performers, and we need this and this and this. Okay, fine, so everybody packed and went. Vaudeville was not exactly strong still, but it was still the last part of it. And so they went over and they unpacked and they went to the theater and found out that it really wasn't vaudeville, that it was a burlesque theater. Now I don't know, burlesque is a I don't know where that name comes from, but it's a little more risque, shall we say, than vaudeville. So they were stuck there, so they said, okay, they'll work it. Now, in 1946 and 47, a lot of times they would have Father Time leaving the old year and the New Year baby for the new year, so they would have 2 people on stage. Well, they had the Father Time with the beard and the white gown and the staff and everything, but they needed the baby, and I was the baby. Now this is, we don't show this a lot, but I went out and tried it, and this was me. I was a 1946-47 baby.
Okay.
This is as embarrassing as when you're on a bear rug in front of your boyfriend or girlfriend sitting down and says, "Oh, look." But that was my first out on stage. But we had this show for 20 years. With that show, we averaged between 50 and 75,000 miles a year driving. We did approximately 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. Moved every time. We'd go coast to coast. We did a year in Alaska, 2 years in Hawaii, and 10 years in Europe. When we were in Europe, we were working primarily for the American military clubs on bases, and being the only American show over there at the time. It was from 54 to 64, with it being close to, not really close, but not that far away from the end of the war, and especially in Germany, it was still very tense, different, shall we say. So, but we had so many bases over there. Nobody here had any idea how many bases we had. As you know, and we still have them, but not as many as we did. But we traveled with this show, and that in Europe is where I started really working full time. This is me here. I was 12 years old, 14 years old, and 16. So I put in my time, because it was a nightclub, it was not one that I could bounce out at 4 or 5 years old. You know, they really didn't like babies in nightclubs. So I was what they call a late bloomer. We came back from Europe. And then Mother was getting older, as we all do, and I have a sister that is 17 years younger than me. So Mother and I, at that time it was Mother and I, Mother and Dad had stayed in Europe, and we felt that one of us should have a legitimate type family lifestyle, so she retired and she stayed to writing, and she created, but she couldn't get out of it. She created something like 6 community theater groups in the town she lived in. So, you know, you don't get away from it because it's, you know, it's like Italian. It's not eating spaghetti or something. You know, it's a part of you. It's in your blood. Mm. But I worked with several groups, and I sang for a while by myself. I ended up being more of a singer, and I sang for many years. But it's a full life. Like I say, we have 5 generations. I'm the 4th. The 5th generation, my daughter is a singer and a pianist. And my son, he's half my son. My sister and I share him. Mm-hmm. He's in, I found this picture finally. It's a small picture, but he's a very good-looking kid. This is his younger days. Mm-hmm. He's started out as a makeup artist in New York for fashion, and then he's now in LA, and he just finished doing, which we heard yesterday, had a huge award in LA for doing his first short film to show his talents. He directed, wrote it, acted in it, did it all, and came out with a really nice award on it, and which hopefully will get him even into higher ranks. But it's a life that is it's more than a passion. When you're born into it, because you're born into it, you do what you're born into. And I say it's like royalty, where your life is laid out for you. They will definitely make sure you have some talent that's worthy on stage, because that's where you're going. Do you have any questions?
So you learn a lot with your family about that, how they did, and you did it yourself after that.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's when you sit down and you're talking stories, or you're telling newspapers, or you go over and over the stories, and you're raised with the stories as a child. For me, it was for Mother, it was a great childhood, because she always said it was like living over the rainbow. It was just perfect for her. She loved it. She had fans. She had children her own age that she could play with all the time. So she was with in the towns, they would dock and they'd be there in the afternoon, they'd come see the show, but she would play with them in the morning. Oh, Betty, hi, you haven't seen you, and they'd get together. For me, it was much different because I grew up in an adult world. I didn't have the children. So whatever childhood I had to create as a child. So it's a different mindset. You know, I mean, when you blow out the candles on the cake, you wish to be 21. So, so because it's sort of lonely because you don't have anybody in your world. This is the world you're going to go into. That's the world you want to be at now. So it's just a completely different raising, and different bringing up. I would spend my time in the dressing rooms, not being out in public. Our lifestyle was totally different because we would get up at noon, have breakfast, but we would be coming home at 3 o'clock in the morning, going to a restaurant to eat at 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and I would be there. Mother never left me alone with anybody, so I was there always. So they'd see the whole show in a restaurant eating breakfast, or something, and then me in the corner. So that was a real typical point of being seen and not heard. So you have a totally different type of childhood as my mother. Was it different? Definitely different. And was it difficult? At times it was. I can't deny that. There are moments when you don't understand why other children won't play with you, because you're a stranger in town and everything. But it's just a lot of different parts of it, But was it educational? Oh, completely. Totally psychologically, and as far as education, it was fabulous. I had the least education probably of everybody in the family because I was working by the 5th grade, by 6th grade. So it was whatever I was educated by or with was physically in front of me and not in a book. 10 years in Europe was unbelievable education, especially at that time, because I saw things that people would never see even now. And the politics of countries, the problems with countries, and just the lifestyle, because Europe was so pure at that time. It would kill me. I haven't been back to Europe since '64, and I think it would kill me to go back and see a McDonald's someplace or a Kentucky Fried. When they say, "Oh, yeah, Walmart," I go, "Oh, God, no, icky poo! How could you?" But it's just, it was just really good at that time to be over there for us.
Hey, Joaleene, speaking about book, can you show it again to the viewer in
Sure.
case they want to order it?
This one, Showboat?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it's called Here Comes the Showboat by Betty Bryant, and it's actually published in Kentucky.
Aspect. How did you do for your own kids?
Okay, well now this is a very interesting story that is not usually on the front page of my life, but in '64 I had a child, and it was what I call a non-consensual knowing type situation, and I got pregnant. I gave her up for adoption. And she came back, I came back to Chicago with her and had the baby in Chicago. Signed her off through the church, and she was adopted by a South Side Chicago family, very fabulous family. They had another child they had adopted and one of their own. So it was a very good family, and old style American middle class, heating and air conditioning for generations type family, and had no connection to show business in any aspect. Saw a movie once a month maybe, and if that. And then in 2017, my sister gave me and herself a kit to Ancestry.com. My dad was adopted, so his story and it never jived, so we decided to find out exactly what we are. So anyway, in the report, there's a little blocky thing on the corner that says we're 99 and 9/10 sure. It's like a black cutout of this adult and this smaller person. We're 99 9/10 sure that you are the mother of this child. So I said, oh, okay. I had always wanted to connect her, but as I say, it's not always what they call a really welcoming type situation. The child can have different opinions. I don't know, you drop me, dump me, whatever. You know, I mean, she can have anger, she can be thrilled, but it's something I wanted to do carefully. But this was the first time I really had a connection as to where she was. So, and my sister being 17 years younger was much more technology, and she's much better techie than I am. So she looked her up and got all the information on her. And so I said, okay, I wrote her a letter, and I said, I know that this may not be what you want, but I feel that you at least should know your history. I mean, we have so much history, and that I didn't want her to feel that she didn't have a good background, so so she didn't answer. 3 months went by, and I was really upset, and I didn't realize she didn't get the letter until almost at the end of the 3 months. She didn't live there anymore. So then I was getting very icky about it. I said, I want to have closure on this. We either get together or we don't. I don't want to keep thinking about it every week. So as I tell everybody, I said I had 3 brandies, 3 cognacs, and then I called her. So we had, and she didn't answer, and I left a message again. And then 15 minutes later, she called me, and she was in tears. And she was so thrilled, and she said, I am so thankful to you for what you did, and I am so happy, and everything. And she said, it's so great to know who I am, what I am, and why I am. And as it turned out, she ended up going to Notre Dame College in Indiana, and she majored in music. She was a pianist, a singer. She worked for the Archdiocese in Chicago for creating choir groups in different churches and being a major choir director and a musician in the church. She also did some off-Broadway music in New York. She sang and played in nightclubs, and I mean, it was just really outstanding, because it's your blood. It's not just a passion. When you have so many generations, after a certain point in anything, it's like having 5 generations of policemen or farmers or whatever. You don't think of anything else. It's such a life and a purpose, and that's you can't deny it. And that happens even with us when we got out of the business. When I got out of the business, I went into business which I knew nothing about. I had sung in front of 10,000 people in fairs and big events and everything. When I got a job as a waitress because I knew nothing else. And a friend of mine got me a job. I said, okay, fine. I'm shaking, pouring coffee. It was like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm taking an order and talking to this person. It was a job, a real job. Never had one. None of us in the family ever had one of those, And eventually I ended up with having my own business, a costume shop. And that's what I learned, how I learned to sew when I was a kid, costume shop. So I had a costume rental shop for about 20 years. And you try at a certain point sometimes. I got married very late in life when I was 50, so I decided really not to get into the big background thing and everything and with everybody, and you pull away from it. But then you come to a certain point where you are what you are. And the amazing part is you don't realize how much of your background reflects on business, reflects that it actually, you can use your background because you're in sales.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you very much, and I hope that our viewers are going to enjoy as much as we do always. Thank you so much.
I'm thrilled when you bring people over. Yes.